since I'm an international touring artist by profession and all the gigs were canceled and the borders closed. So I decided to start a daily live stream show instead, at least until the borders open up again and gatherings of 50 people packed like sardines into a small folk club are once again a regular occurrence, whenever that might be. You can find this broadcast every weekday, usually starting at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT, live streamed on the Facebook pages of Popular Resistance, Food Not Bombs Global, and the Song News Network, among other places. Each episode is archived in a playlist on my YouTube channel called Discussions with David, and each one also goes out in podcast form. Which you can find by searching for This Week with David Rovics on any podcasting platform. You can also find these broadcasts at davidrovics.com/quarantine, which is the place on my website where I've been keeping all activities, live streams, podcasts, and songs related to the pandemic. Every Monday is an open mic, and you are all encouraged to sign up there on my website. This Friday is a May Day special concert with from my living room, which will start an hour later than usual at 7 p.m. GMT, sponsored by Attack in Cologne, Germany. Today, I'm very happy to have Tommy Sands with me for the hour. First of all, there's another Tommy Sands who is also a well-known musician of the same generation who also tours regularly throughout the US, and I just discovered that today. I'm talking to Tommy Sands from Ireland, not the other one, just to be clear. I first heard a song Tommy wrote when I was a child because it was one of those songs that all the kids who went to summer camps run by Unitarians knew, called Your Daughters and Your Sons. I didn't actually hear Tommy sing the song himself in any form until many years later. It's one of those songs that sprouted wings and developed a life of its own, spreading mostly by word of mouth. Other songs of Tommy's spread because they were helped along by being recorded by people like Pete Seeger, Joan Baez, and many other folks listeners are likely to have heard of. I first actually met Tommy in a bank in Belfast, Ireland, and that had been taken over by Occupy Wall Street activists in 2011. We had both been asked to sing for folks in the squatted bank there in the center of the city. Tommy, welcome to my little live stream show. You live in a gorgeous town in County Down, between the Mourne Mountains and the sea, and I'm just trying to imagine what life must be like there these days in a place where everybody knows each other and now they're not visiting each other's houses, or what's it like? Can you just give us a little picture of Rostrevor in late April 2020? Tommy, did your he froze up. Tommy, there's nothing happening. That's funny. We were just talking a minute ago. Is the picture frozen? Okay, we'll try to get Tommy back here. That was I don't know, that was, I mean, the vagaries of the internet and live streaming is such that connections don't always stay connected. Of course, this is also true of all kinds of other media. They lose people on BBC interviews, even, so let's see. Hey, now the picture is now you're vertical instead of horizontal. Are we using a different device? You there now? Let's see.
The computer seems to be not working, David.
Okay.
So I'll just move on to this here for a moment.
Oh yeah, I can hear. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you very well.
Brilliant. And that just sounds great. Anyway, it's just as good, really. What you're using your cell phone now? Now you froze up again. Maybe it's the connection to Wi-Fi or something. I don't know. But let's see what's going on. Yeah, another frozen. I wonder if we can try this on a phone. I've never. I don't know how that works. Um, but I would maybe try restarting your router, or I don't know. I don't know. My technical capabilities are very limited. To,
Uh,
yeah. Now you're back.
Good.
Let's see.
But I'm going to move, David, to another place, another part
Yeah,
of the house here.
yeah. Wherever the
I,
router is,
I,
downstairs, right?
I'll, ju- I'll just get downstairs from this terrible office of mine, uh,
It's
which
a
is full of
lovely
stuff. I think
office.
you were up here a few times, David,
Yeah,
but
but I remember the
when
Wi-Fi
you're,
router is downstairs.
it is, yeah. And I thought it was been smart coming up here, but I'll just take you downstairs here
Yeah,
to.
yeah. We'll just hang out in the laundry room with the Wi-Fi router. That'll be less picturesque, but better sound quality, I think.
That's right. It's that's the sea out there
Oh,
in the
look at that.
background, that David, and the far side you can see. Let me see. Can we get out of here?
Oh,
Just a
wonderful.
moment. I'll bring you around to the room where we used to sit and philosophize in, and as you can see, it's trying to rain out here, but not succeeding too well. In the background, you can see the mountains of the Cooley Mountains, which is
There they are.
In the Republic of Ireland, where this is actually the last house in the north of Ireland before the Loch, Carnford Loch, and the Cooley Mountains. Very well. We live in the Moran Mountains, which is on the northern side of the border, and the Coolies, of course, is full of all sorts of mythology, Cuchulainn, and all those people used to do a lot of running around over there and telling stories. But I'll go back in here, David, closer to the router, and I think we'll. Sorry for taking you all over the house here, but
Oh, it's a wonderful tour of the house. I think there's a lot of people stuck in their little apartments who just enjoyed that little view of the sea there.
yes, yes, yes. Good.
What is life like there in late April 2020 in Rostrevor? I just can't imagine in a town like that where everybody knows each other, and now our people just now they visit on the stoops and stay 6 feet apart and everything. It's just can
It's
you paint a little picture?
it's strange. It's strange how people are who usually whisper in a low voice to each other, how we're all learning how to project our voice like professional preachers. And but it is people are inside for the most part. We do have a nice park and forest here, which is actually closed, unfortunately. Uh, well, it's all for in case too many people come and can understand the reasons. But sometimes I go out into the forest at the back here, and it's the beauty and quietness of it. You can hear birds singing that I haven't heard singing like that for years because there's no sound of traffic.
Wow.
Very little cars or lorries on the road, and they're singing unaccompanied. Beautiful,
Mm.
and it's almost like you know. I see a lot of because of the absence of people, a lot of beautiful wildflowers. Uh, Standing proudly untrodden, making space for people like me, even though nature sometimes has not been left space for by our society and our world. So on the one hand, it's very quiet and strange and eerie, uh, and on the other hand, it's a little bit like what it used to be years ago when you would recognize a car if it came. I remember I lived on a small country road called the Ryan Road, very narrow road. In fact, it used to be said that if a dog wanted to wag its tail on the Ryan Road, it had to do it that way there rather than that way because there wasn't enough space. But we could hear there was one or two cars on the countryside, and you would know every car. You could hear it coming a few miles away. You're changing gears in the hills, and in a way, it's a little bit mindful of that, and at the same time, modern nature a little bit angry with what's going on with our abuse of it, and maybe part of the reason of the virus and so on. But on the other hand, bringing out the beauties of nature and reminding us that there's something more important that we must look after.
Yeah. And what's it bringing out in terms of the human population, would you say, around there? I mean, I know there's such a different situation in so many different towns and cities and countries, and just everybody experiencing such a, I mean, probably the widest array of possible experiences humans could have, really, to a crisis. But from wonderful, pleasurable experiences to most horrible experiences and everything in between, I think.
True, there was a funeral today, and of course people couldn't go to it, but they stood by on the side of the street and waved and applauded as the coffin was being driven up the hill to the Stars of Sea Church up there, and only a few people could go. That's one of the terrible, sad things that been so near and yet so far away from each other. But I think it's bringing out uh, the very good and caring things within people that has always been there, and sometimes the speed of life and uh, greed rather than need sometimes drives us in all sorts of directions. But there's a calmness about the place at the moment, and in many ways, it's very beautiful too.
Mm-hmm. I remember reading in your wonderful memoir, Songman, about when you were a child, in that, not right where you are, but in the same county anyway, same area, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
And you actually, I mean, my, just like to put this into a little bit of context for other, people out there, like, I mean, my grandpa was born in New York City in 1899, and when he was a child, he remembers electric lights coming to New York for the first time, and it was a big deal, and you were born in 1945, I believe, according to
Yes.
Wikipedia,
Mhm.
and you also remember electricity coming to your village.
Oh,
Is that?
yes,
I
yes, I
mean, that
surely
was.
do.
Can you just
That
talk about
was,
what that was like?
well, before, we usually had oil lamps and candles. We did our homework with a candle and an oil lamp. And then about 1972, maybe a little bit before that, uh, the gas came. And I remember the man who put in the gas, a man called John McClory. Uh, he said, do you realize now whenever you get the gas in, you have to paint the the, the walls of the house? And I thought as a child, is it some law? Oh no, he says no, but you'll know. So of course, in went the mantle, the gas mantle, and the light was turned on. Suddenly, we saw all the cobwebs that was around the place, and spiders suddenly realized the whole world was changing. And of course, marks on the walls that had never been noticed because of the dimness of the oil lamp. And then the electric came after that, and we nearly lost a run of ourselves. We had an aunt that my brother often talks about. Uh, she she didn't want to get the electricity in at all. She thought it was a bit dangerous. And but the neighbours were at her to say that it's coming up the road anyway. The poles are coming up the road. You might as well get it in. So just to kind of humour them, she got the electric light in, but she, I think she only turned on once and nearly blinded her. She turned it off again, and she used to. Uh, she used sometimes she would turn on the light to find the matches to light. It was an amazing time. And then the running water come down the road as well. we didn't have water in the house, of course. Well, the only running water we had was running to the well with it, or for it, with a bucket. Or as my mother used to say, take two, it'll balance you.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
true.
remember discussions. I remember discussions in the house, the local farmers talking about this impending uh, problem or opportunity of this running water coming. And some people really thought they were worried about it. They say it could be very dangerous. That sinks can overflow, and baths very dangerous because it opens up the pores, and anything can come in. So it's a very different world that
Wow.
I grew up in those days. And if the old people are around now and have been able to witness you and me talking to each other, seeing each other across the Atlantic Ocean,
Yeah.
they would say there's no such thing.
Yeah.
There's no such thing.
Yeah. Seems crazy. That is so interesting to think. I mean, it's just, if we don't hear an actual account of the coming of electricity and running water to a town like that, I mean, I don't know how many people would just assume anything that you just said would be that way it was, right? Because, like, I mean, when you hear people talking about it, these kinds of things now, there's only one way to look at it, right? It's like, if you don't have electricity and running water, then you're underdeveloped, and everything must really suck. Which, not to say that everything was great without it, but there are two sides to that, isn't? I mean, there's some pros and cons to these things, perhaps.
Well, my mother, she used wind and solar energy, and she used to dry the clothes on the hedge with the sheet would be hung on the hedge, and the sun would come and the wind would come, and you know, I think natural energy was harnessed uh, very cleverly, very cleverly, and sometimes we try to reinvent a wheel which has been rolling along in its own quiet, gentle way. I remember hearing a story, uh, David, about this student who went to see his old man, and the old man is showing him around, and the young man says, "What is that there?" And the old man says, "Well, that's a sundial." The young man says, "What's that?" Well, says the old man, yeah, the sun comes and there's at a certain time of the day it throws a shadow that way there, and you can tell the time. And the young man marveled and he said, "What will they think of next?" And so there was there's a lot that we had before, but it wasn't all that uh, beneficial for people who are into making big money quick to use it. Uh, it's difficult to harness a wind and sell it, or harness a sun and sell it. So you ignore it, and it's only now that people are struggling to have the powers that be see the value and power of nature uh, with very little kind of, I suppose, work or devices to let it get on with its job.
Hmm. Tommy, you're how you put out a wonderful album last fall with a bit of a American theme in it, and I believe you had plans to tour over this part of the world, and that probably all went to somewhere else. It's not happening. Can you tell us about just how things evolved in the course of the past couple months, and in terms of your professional life? I think it's just these kinds of just recounting how these things go for people is, I think, of interest, because it's these things haven't happened before, so it's all kind of interesting and strange, and yeah.
Yes, as you know very well, David, you've been a great traveler, a musician yourself, uh, at this time of the year, excuse me, we're on the road and singing the songs that we were writing during the winter.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a great way of meeting up with people, going into people's houses, and saying hello as we are uh, at the moment. Uh, Pete Siegel, a great friend of yours too, uh, David, used to talk about. He says, "I wonder, will technology save the world before it destroys it?"
Hmm.
So there's so many great things with modern technology, and this is one of them. And to use it like this, it gives musicians like myself and yourself the opportunity
Oh, we lost you there for a moment, Tommy. A little bit of freezing audio happening and video freezing, but it's a and when the audio and video freezes, it's never like when somebody has their mouth closed, is it? It's always an interesting expression. Let's see if we can get Tommy back somehow. Let's see what happens. Take him out and bring him in, and nothing. Blank. A blank. Let's see if he pops back up. When he pops back up again in the picture there, Tommy has been doing. Tommy just started a YouTube channel, by the way, and he's been broadcasting at least one video a few days ago, and that. Now I'm just guessing that what happened there was not actually the phone, the Wi-Fi, but it could have been that the battery in the phone died. That would be a sensible explanation since he moved from the computer to the phone, and then um, that kind of thing can happen. Um, but while we're waiting for Tommy to return, if anybody has anything we should talk about with Tom, tell us what you've been reading about lately. Oh, great idea. Whatever. What? And someone else says, uh, uh, "You were able to see me in Bonn, though not at the same time." Oh, and to see Tommy in Bonn. Uh-huh. And many wonderful hours driving in your car. Thanks to you both. I'm not sure who you saw, Rip, in Bonn, but it was either me or Tommy or both. But in any case, I'm glad. I think Tommy and I have both probably done a lot of gigs where there might not be a huge crowd, but those people that are there came from very long distances away to get there. That happens. But uh, uh, that's funny. I should be prepared for when the guest just disappears from the screen, and with something to talk about. But it's shifting gears from asking questions to telling stories is actually quite a strange transition to make. I could sing a song. I could go get my guitar. Hopefully, Tommy comes back on the screen, but that is a question of whatever technical issues might be happening. There's a little thing on StreamYard here that says having issues. I could click that, but I don't think it'll help. But what I've been reading lately? That's actually it's a great question. Yeah, technical difficulties. We're waiting for Tommy to come back, and hopefully he will be back, and then we'll ask him more questions. But what? But somebody else asked, yeah, what have I been reading lately? And what I've been reading lately is actually really fascinating. If you do a search online for successful rent strike, you'll find some very interesting stories, and it basically that led me down a rabbit hole to find a PhD dissertation that is freely available online from Drew University by somebody who did a dissertation about a rent strike that went on for years at the beginning of the 20th century in Roscommon in Ireland, around the center of Ireland. And it's yeah, it's a fantastic. It's called Two Windows. Was the name of her dissertation, and it's a fantastic history of a rent strike and how it was organized and how they managed to hold out for years and how they dealt with evictions and supported each other. And yeah, fantastic. A bunch of history, particularly relevant now in the face of the increasing homelessness and poverty going on in both the U.S. and Ireland. Yeah, somebody says the irony of talking about technology when this happened. He was actually praising the technology when his window just disappeared. Um, the between somebody is saying on Facebook the connection between the interview and Food Not Bombs. I know Food Not Bombs from my teenage years when we tried to establish a Food Not Bombs group in my hometown in Germany. Maybe you could talk about that. Yeah, this is I've been broadcasting these discussions on the Food Not Bombs Global channel because, as well as on Popular Resistance's Facebook page, because generally I'm interviewing people that are related in various ways to both of those networks and organizations. And Food Not Bombs is a wonderful global network that is focused on basically challenging the priorities of states and other folks all over the world, especially here in the United States, where Food Not Bombs started, where we spend half of our tax dollars on the military, and where we have millions of people homeless and hungry in the richest country in the world. And so when folks started Food Not Bombs back several decades ago, it started out in Massachusetts and in California, and you can see last week I did an interview on this very platform on the Food Not Bombs Facebook page. I did an interview with Keith McHenry, who is a founder of the network, which is now a global network all over the world, feeding people mostly in public spaces, and also in order to feed people, and also in order to highlight the fact that there is this poverty in the midst of wealth in places like the United States and many other countries where Food Not Bombs is active. And in some countries, like the United States, they regularly get arrested by police for the crime of feeding people publicly. And in the Philippines, the consequences can be far, far worse, and many other places where Food Not Bombs is also active. And the interview with Keith, I highly recommend. It was he was talking about a lot of things that are going on in Santa Cruz, California right now, with the massive problem of housing and homelessness, and which has gotten really, I believe the term is appropriate, exponentially worse since this exponentially growing virus has come around, and they're now putting people who don't have a place to live in pens, metal pens. Let's see. I think we got Tommy back. Hey, wonderful. That was you're
David,
back, and it looks
I'm
good.
back.
Yeah.
David,
That,
sorry about that. I have no idea what happened.
oh, no problem at all. And I I was just had that experience where like to transition from asking questions to just talking is it's such a shift to make. It took at least a full minute of me just like babbling here before I could, then I started talking about what I was reading. Somebody asked what I was reading, and so
Okay.
I that's what I've been talking about since you've been gone, and which is actually, I mean, if you happen to know anything about the 1901 rent strike in Roscommon, that's what I've been reading about. A PhD thesis. I did a search online for successful rent strike, just because there's a rent strike going on all over the United States now, as one out of four renters were unable to pay their rent at the beginning of April because of the shutdown of the society, and because at least more than one in four people in the country are basically $400 away from homelessness. I mean, that's the level of poverty in this country is extreme, as you know.
Yes.
But the in it, so I was like doing a search for, well, where have rent strikes happened that have actually won, where they were successful. And it was a real, I've been only part way through this PhD dissertation of somebody who did a PhD about the dissertation about this rent strike in Roscommon in Ireland in 1901.
Yes.
But it went on for years, and it led directly to the 1903 Wyndham land reform law that improved a lot for tenant farmers in Ireland to some fairly significant extent, I guess, at the time. And yeah, it's fascinating, all this. But one of the things that was so especially interesting about reading this dissertation was how she it was clearly written by somebody of with Irish lineage from the United States, I believe, and she traveled to Ireland to do some of the research for the dissertation. And this rent strike in Roscommon in 1901, it was mentioned in the Irish Times dozens of times. It was mentioned in the press in London like 150 times in different London newspapers. It was a big deal in the New York Times as well. But she couldn't find anybody in Roscommon who had any kind of memory of, in terms of, like, their parents or grandparents were involved with this rent strike, and it was like a really big deal. And I think that is. And I'm only part way through it, so I don't know what her conclusions are about why something as big as that can get forgotten. But in the midst of maybe much bigger historical developments, like revolutions, civil wars, and famines, and then a rent strike is just, well, what's that? A footnote, perhaps. But I just this is not I'm not trying to get you to give the answer to this non-question, but it reminds me that you not long ago did a tour of Ireland where you made a point of having gigs in all 32 counties, and I wonder if you could just talk about why did you do that, and what was that experience like. And just for our listeners, I mean, there's 32 counties on the island of Ireland, most of which do not have anything that most people would call a city in it. So you're talking about 32 mostly fairly small gigs in villages, I imagine. I just
Yes. Yes. I there was a few. Well, I'd wanted to. Sometimes I'd get the odd letter from various parts of Ireland saying, "When are you going to come down and play down our way?" And I said, "I definitely will go." So I wanted to, and also my Fanon and Maya were playing with me at the time, and they hadn't been around all Ireland, although they had been around lots of different places in the world. So I was determined to do it, and so before I went, I was doing some school concerts, and a lot of children, were learning the names of all the counties. So I decided to write a song to put all the counties into it, and you know, down in Armagh and Antrim, some of the punnings were pretty toe curdling, but I they're still singing. I started off in the north here. There are 9 counties in Ulster, but 6 of them are in the United Kingdom part. The all 3 are in the, like, Donegal is in the south, although it's north of here. It's very far north of here. Uh, but the first verse went, "Go down to Armagh and trim her curly hair. For a manna, Bob and Derry will take her to the fair. Tie her own wee pony, her calf and cow as well. And Monaghan made on that shawl she bought in Donegal." And it goes on like that. But anyway, I decided to play in all the counties. I did a few big enough ones, in Dublin and Galway and in Belfast. And I did those with some. In fact, I did 2 with Tom Paxton from the United States, and Peggy Seeger as well. and I did the rest with my kids and also on my own. But I played in some fairly big theaters, but mainly in the smallest of places. I played in three prisons. I played in two graveyards. Uh, one of Turlico Carlin in
Right.
Roscommon, the great
Mm,
harper, the
wonderful.
blind harper. And then I went on to Carrick-on-Suir in Tipperary, where the Clancys come from. And they
Hmm.
were very good friends of mine. They're all gone, but their wives are very much alive and well. And we went out to the grave, and we sang a few songs, and I played a tune, sort of a lament on the whistle, over Paddy's grave, Paddy Clancy. And his wife, Mary, was there, and the tear came to Mary's eye because this rainbow suddenly appeared in the sky. And Mary said that Paddy used to say that that was a sign that he was listening
Hmm.
to what was going on. And then we went back into uh, Carrick that night and dedicated the concert to the Clancys, and all the relations come out. But it was lovely, and it as well as that, it was just after the Celtic Tiger, and I wanted to see if Ireland had changed much, and it had in the cities, but in the countryside it hadn't changed much, and people were the same, and you would stop asking directions to ask directions, and they would come and they put their elbows in the window of the car and be there for a good long chat, you know.
Yeah.
And so it is lovely. And I played in an office of a magazine called Ireland's Own, which is very old, nostalgic type of magazine, but it's got a lot of beautiful old little uh, pieces of wisdom and ancient wisdom and beautiful. So it is a very enjoyable tour.
Yeah. The asking for directions around the time of the beginning of the Celtic Tiger period, when all the highways, the motorways were being built all over Ireland. um, I remember how hard it was to ask for directions, because on all the maps that they were making back then, they had all these roads on the maps that did not yet exist. I don't know why they did that, but like, and this was before GPSs were that common. We were still buying maps, or I can't remember what the deal was, if it was like on the GPS, but the roads didn't exist yet. They were just in construction. So you'd go around and ask people about a road that didn't exist yet, that was going to be called by a number. And of course, nobody knows roads by numbers in Ireland, right? It's they have names, and
Yes,
but the names weren't on the map. So I got so lost. It was some of the lostest I've ever been. But it's yeah,
yes,
it was a big construction site. The traffic was incredible too, all over the whole island at the time. It was like the
yes.
economy was booming. Everybody was buying cars, but there were no highways yet. It was a very interesting period, but it's very different now, huh? I mean, the poverty, the homelessness in the cities, and like Dublin and Cork, is really quite shocking,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it is. It is. It's become part of a global world where I suppose uh, people's people's lives, our economies are not managed very well in for the benefit of ordinary people, and there are jobs all right, but very often they're just survival jobs, uh, and I suppose with this virus situation, it's going to leave it much worse. So it's certainly tough times ahead, very tough times ahead.
It
And
seems like, when you look at Irish history, like, I mean, along with so many other things, one of the things that was always a big deal was the whole question of land and who owned the land, and tenant farmers and the land question. It constant. I mean, in the history of so many countries, whether colonized or not, the land question is so always so paramount. But for a country, for a like the like the Republic of Ireland, to have all these laws passed around land 100 years ago, and now for there to be such a crisis with housing and homelessness, it's interesting that how it's just kind of depressing, really.
Yes, yes. That land is well, I suppose, like many old traditional uh, ways of living, it was the land that people depended on so much, and that has come down in people's genes in many ways. Uh, there was you always could get a living from the land, and whenever I suppose the whole clan owned the land. Everyone had a share of it, and until I suppose in Ireland until the Anglo Normans, when they came and said, "Well, I don't see anybody here." The old
Mm,
story. We were looking for
real
land, and
terra
no
nullis.
one owns land here.
Mm,
And I remember, and then of course people are they can't make it. Not only do they lose their land, but they lose the ability to live. And it's not like that too bad here, of course, anymore. But there's elements of that creeps in. I remember some years ago, this I suppose a man was working for a big farmer, and he uh, he asked the man. He says, "Where did you get all this land?" And the man says, "Oh," he says, "I got it from my father." And where did he get it? Oh, well, he would have got it from his father. And where would his father have got it from? Oh, well, he would have his father's father, and so on. And where does so on get it? Oh, well, no, they would have fought for it fair and square. And your man took off his coat and he says, "Do you mind if I fight you now fair and square to get it back?"
yeah.
And in many ways, that uh, that was the reasoning behind a lot of violence. That if something is taken away by violence, then uh, you have a right to get it back by violence. This doesn't work anymore, but at least there must be acknowledgement of all those things happening, and a practical acknowledgement, be it in uh, Palestine, be it in the United States, be it in Australia, New Zealand, be it in Ireland. It's not just a question of land anymore, but it's acknowledging what has happened to people, what has been done to people. And I think it's very important. You may not change things. You can't start taking land back and get or whatever, but even to acknowledge it and to take it into account whenever you're, I suppose, looking down your nose at poor people or anywhere in any situation who have a right to a living off the land or whatever the earth has to offer. And so the land thing is it was always very important. I grew up on a small farm, and every field, every piece of. I remember people used to taste the soil and say, "That's great. That's soil worth fighting for."
Hmm.
And it can go beyond reasoning, but there has to be a reasoning to bring it into a state of normality
And
in a
actually,
way.
in the farm you grew up in, was it? Did your family own that farm, or was it? Were you renting the land? What's the?
Uh, well, we owned the land with that we had with 14 and 3/4 acres, and it was lots of small farms like that. Uh, it wasn't really enough to keep us living, but it was enough to stop us dying.
Right.
Uh, it was hard work. It was hard work,
Yeah.
and I grew up between the horse and the tractor. In a way, the
Mm.
the old horse we had died of old age, and we couldn't afford to buy a tractor. So a lot of the work was done by hand. My father with a
Wow.
spade and the scythe, mowing the hay, and we would tie it into sheaves and put it into stooks and put it into shigs and put it into stacks, and then the thresher man would come around and thresh it, and all the neighbours would gather in to help. And it was, I think, it was one way that how a great way of getting to know neighbours, regardless of their religious affiliations or political persuasions, because they all helped out at that. And I was talking to an orange man not too long ago, and he says, "We never meet at all now." He says, "It's a pity they done away with the thresher." And the workers coming together to work, it's very important.
Mm. Yeah, one of the big downsides of machines and automation,
Yeah, yeah.
as much as there are advantages. You know, somebody was saying earlier when you were away for a few minutes, tell us a story about Tommy, and this it just occurs to me to in the context of this little subtopic here, that where you live now, the house you live in, what used to be part of the Ross family estate, and now and which was later divided up, and yeah, and I only sort of discovered that one winter while visiting you, taking a walk through the rain, and coming upon the monument, and then noticing the burning picture of the White House. And then, and then wondering, oh, this is unusual to come upon a picture of the White House on fire in a small Irish village, and then I saw that General Ross, who burned down the White House in the War of 1812, was actually the heir to the Ross family estate that you are now living on a part of.
Yes, exactly. This is a stable.
The horse
Uh,
stable. Huh?
this is a stable. In fact, over there you can see the where the horses ate out of the indents are still in the wall. There's a you can see it maybe behind me, the indent in the wall where the manger,
Uh-huh.
and there's another one. This is whenever we arrived here, uh, the well we got the horses had left at that stage, and just got to go out here into the. But it's a bit brighter. But anyway, the horses. Oh, funny seat. Those horses actually after the Rosses bought left the place, it is owned by the Bowes Lyons family, the Queen Mother's people, and actually I didn't realize the Queen, this present Queen Elizabeth, she used to come here because the horses were here in
Mm.
this house. And I met an old friend of mine that I hadn't seen for years, and he was telling me that he was telling me something that I never knew. And in fact, very few people did know it. That I met him at the back end of a funeral, and we were talking, and how you doing? I haven't seen you for 40, 50 years. And I remember he was an altar boy. He used to love lighting candles. And I said, "What do you do? Or what have you been doing to yourself?" I just as a fire brigade man. And I said, "Did you like it?" Ah, yes. He says, "I became the chief, like, fire brigade." He's very modest sort of a guy. And I said, "So that's great." Ah, he says, "I got the old MBE there, that's a member of the British Empire, And I says, "Did you see yourself, me and the Queen?" "Oh, I did. I did. I went over to receive the award." And I said, "What was she like?" Ah, she was a nice wee woman, very small. She stood up in a wee box like, and she would shake hands with us all. And she said, "Did she say anything to you?" "Oh, aye, she did," says he. "What did she say?" says I. "Well, she says, where do you come from?" And he says, "I come from Warren Point." It's Warren Point just down there. And oh, she says, "I know Warren Point well." "Do you?" says she. "Ah, well," she says, "but I would know Rostrevor better, like, because between the age of 9 and 11, she used to come here to our aunt's house here and down around here. And she saw her first, I think, was it Walkie Talkie movie in Warren Point, just over here. So there is that sort of link in all sorts of directions. Uh, it's very interesting. Uh, After the ceasefire here, they decided to do up the General Ross monument there, and they asked me to write a song about General Ross and burning down the White House. I couldn't find a narrative that I could deal with. You know, a general that I wouldn't be a big fan of anyway, and I don't know what to say about him. And I mentioned this to you, and you says, "Give me some of the details," and you come up with a great song, and to sing it here now. The man who burnt the White House down.
Great. Uh, you mentioned doing those gigs in cemeteries during that tour, and I wondered in the few minutes left here if you would tell us a little about that. Just I know this is sort of taking everything out of context, and I don't even know how you could introduce this story. But just you told me about during your recent visit with Catherine to Iran, how you had a very interesting conversation with a Russian man in a Iranian cemetery.
Oh yes, yes. I get an invitation uh, from the independent artists and thinkers of Iran to go to an event there, and I wasn't too sure what I was supposed to do, but we arrived in Mashhad airport. It's near the Afghan border, and I didn't know anybody in that room. They were all coming to the festival from different parts of the world, and we were in this little lounge to get our visas sorted out. And I didn't know anybody, and there was one woman who was speaking English, and she noticed me speaking English, and she come over and she says, "Should I know you?" I says, "I don't know. Should I know you?" She says, "I don't know." She says, "You might know my sister." I says, "Who would she be?" "She's married to a man called Tony Blair," says she. And this woman is a Muslim, very interesting woman. Uh, she's Booth, Lauren Booth. She was over at the event. So gradually I got to know these people from very different backgrounds who were there. But the first day we went into the shrine, it's a holy city, and it's the shrine of the eighth Imam. And my interpreter said, she says, I suppose you think it a little bit strange uh, praying at graves here. I said, I don't think it a bit strange at all. We're doing it all the time in Ireland. And I thought about the, the poppies, remembering the dead, the Easter lilies of 1916. And I quoted a, a poem: "The fools, the fools, the fools, they have left us our Fenian dead. And while we hold these graves, Ireland unfree shall never be at peace," or something like that. And this man was walking past, this tall man. I hadn't met him, although he's part of the party. He says, "Who said that?" It turned out his name is Dugan. Not Irish, as the name would suggest, but one of the Russian Dugans.
Mm.
It turned out he was, according to Breitbart News, he was Putin's Rasputin. Very interesting man. Uh, he was regarded by many as the most dangerous philosopher in the world. Uh, well, it's a very different mindset. But anyway, Alexander Dugin, an interesting man. But anyway, he said, "Who said that about the graves?" And I said, "It's Padraig Pearse." He says, "At the graveside of O'Donovan Rossa." I said, "That's right." He says, "I should have known that. I should have known that." This man could speak 10 languages fluently. He said, "The graves in Ireland, the eternal present, the eternal present is so important in Ireland,
Mm.
just like here in Iran." And the Iranian people, fascinating people, very well educated, elegant, uh, very interested in everything. And they've got a very closed regime, but like in many very religious countries, people get on with life, and they've got their own religion of caring, kindness within them. But that was Iran, and it is fascinating. Beautiful country to visit,
Mm.
and we know nothing about it.
Mm.
We not know nothing about those people. They know a lot about us. Uh, we're so much caught up in our own little Western world, even in regard to dealing with virus. The different approaches. You
Yeah.
know, the Western moralistic. Did we do something? Or we been punished? The East more stoical in the sense to endure, and then there are the cynics in between. But there's a balance between all the things that are needed to deal with situations like this. And I suppose the most important thing coming through is the kindness and the caring of ordinary people for fellow human beings in hospitals and care homes, actually giving their life. And as we say in Christianity, no greater love is there than that. And that exists in all the different, in the depths of all the mindsets. It's the highest form. So, near thing we're going to get to divinity is that sense of sharing, that sense of giving to others. And all the other trappings of uh, morality and ethics are just to fill libraries and to fight wars about.
Are you hopeful that after all this is over, there will be some changes for the better in some societies around the whole question of whether we are a human society and things like public health and running water and food are important for everybody, housing, like for the general public health of the planet? Do you see some kind of seismic change happening in a positive direction or negative, or it's hard to tell? Obviously, it's hard to tell, but
Yeah, it is hard to tell. And I suppose there will be, you know, I often think I don't want to go back to normality if normality is the road that led us to this place where we are,
yeah,
where we abuse nature to that degree, where we rip the earth apart, where we invade countries without caring, all about greed. Those same that same mindset is still there. It's up to the people who uh, have got a, a better, a more healthy understanding of life to make sure that those people are not elected,
yeah.
uh, because it is it is pretty close to uh, planeticide. It's pretty close to insanity. Uh, that what we call normality, what that normality is bringing about in the world, uh, be it through not caring, not planning. You know, uh, defense means looking for a war to fight. It should be about looking to defend people's welfare, be it the poorest people, be it the people who need help. It's not about, and it's called defense. all this money going into defense, most of the time is into a tech. And but I think there's enough people, there's enough good people around, uh, thinking people to 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 see through all that, and there should be a great tendency and a renaissance in a way when we come through this, and it will end, to make sure that all the other things going on uh, are somehow curtailed. Like what there was a time when people, we felt proud of America at times. For example, we felt fearful of America, but we never pitied America until now,
Yeah.
because we realize so many people in the United States did not vote for what's going on at the moment, and uh, I pity the mindset that brings that about. And
Hmm.
but I think we'll get there. We'll get there. Someone said one time, faith is not believing that all things that happen will be well, but it is believing that despite what happens, all will be well.
Hmm.
And I think certain truth in that.
Dami, I'd like to thank you so much for joining me for the hour for my little live stream show, and I hope I can get you back sometime, assuming we keep this up. If the borders stay closed, I'll keep this up, I think. I don't know what else to do, so.
Yes, it's great. It's great, David. It's great. I'm delighted. And I didn't get any lights turned on. Everything looks very red here. You'd think I
Oh,
was,
you look great, sound great. This
but
room works very well. You're on the porch there.
yes, yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Great.
David,
Talk to you
thank you
soon,
very
Tommy.
much,
Thank you so
and
much.
thanks for your great work that you're doing here and with your songs, and coming over here, bringing all these wonderful stories, which you put into song. Wonderful things, wonderful work, wonderful
You too,
work.
Tommy. Thank you.
Great,
See you
David.
soon.
Thank you very much indeed. All the best.
You too. Thanks, everybody, for joining me for another discussion with David. That was Tommy Sands, Rostrevor, Ireland. And I'll be back tomorrow to talk with Austin, Texas based organizer and author Lisa Fithian. You can find these interviews archived in video and audio form in various places, including by going to davidrovics.com. Whether I'm live streaming or writing songs or helping to organize a rent strike, my ability to do these things is mostly a result of the support of regular people who send me a few bucks a month. If you're in a position to join their ranks, you can find out more at patreon.com/davidrovics or davidrovics.com/subscribe. See you again soon here in the Matrix and eventually back on the streets.